Wonderful. Thank you so much, Virginia. This was a wonderful presentation. So we have a few questions in the chat. So Radu says, thank you for the webinar. Is the computation of NMA treatment effects limited to a Bayesian approach enrollment, or is there a way to implement a frequentist approach in order to estimate these effects in enrollment?
So the reason that I talk a lot about Bayesian is because Rodman includes network meta regression, as you've seen, and the way to do network meta regression is only Bayesian. So that's what it uses. That's why it calculates the estimate using the Bayesian approach. But as I said, you can, if you have calculated, if you've done your network meta analysis using frequentist approach, you are there's no problem. As I said, this is only done for assessing the reporting bias, and actually it also calculates the frequentist because it uses net meta, so it also uses the frequentist approach, just that we are not showing the output. Simply again, the output is only shown for reference, it's not shown for running your NMA. So if you run your NMA in frequentist approach and that's the results that you produce, in your publication, that's absolutely fine. The results from the Bayesian approach in the Rodman table are only done to assess, it's as part of the bias assessment.
Great. So John also asks, do we need to comment on publication bias based on funnel plots in addition to overall risk of bias due to missing evidence?
So, yeah, maybe that wasn't clear. Publication bias or a cross-study bias, as we call it in the Rodman framework, we actually give priority to qualitative consideration. So you should first think about whether it's plausible that there is publication bias for that specific comparison based on qualitative considerations, such as the example that I made before, but there's also like many other scenarios that are explained in either the Cochrane handbook or other literature. You can additionally look at funnel plots, and that's why we produce contour-enhanced funnel plots, to be precise. But again, you should only do it when you have at least 10 studies, because that's the rule that's also been said a lot in the literature. And you're probably gonna have, like, I mean, we had a very large network and there were only few comparisons that had more than 10 studies. So yes, you can also look at that in addition to the qualitative consideration, but that shouldn't be your primary, you shouldn't focus on that first. You should first think about what the other approaches and the other considerations.
Thank you, Virginia. Related to this point, I was wondering, do you plan to also show the comparison adjusted funnel plots, or you will only focus on?
Yes, actually, I think at some stages we also thought about including it in the app. I think the reason why we didn't, and I think we also do not mention it in the whole actually description of the framework, is because, I mean, we're not against it actually, like probably like we should make clear that we encourage them when run a network meta-analysis, it would be helpful to have it, but because of the way Rodman is built, you first need to assess each comparison, and then in each comparison, the judgment for each comparison is then integrated into the estimates. The bias judgment for the estimate. I didn't see the comparison adjusted funnel plot really fitting too much into it, because it's a more generic way of looking at it, which is good, and I think you should complement it and add both, and then maybe could be like a confirmation if you see that there is some publication bias, or maybe you can also think like you've noticed that there could be publication bias for such and such comparison. But again, I think it would be more at the estimate stage, and it just could be a confirmation of it, especially like at the when you reach the very final stage of the overall bias judgment for the estimate. As I said, the user can overrule the algorithm, so maybe the comparison adjusted final plots could be like that extra bit, or yeah, it can overrule the decision.
Sounds good. Okay. So we have one more question. Can you please state the difference between assumptions, unrelated treatment effects versus exchangeable treatment effects?
So it's not the treatment effects, is the treatment specific interaction. So it's the, as you say, see here in the screenshot. So I cannot go, I think, into detail with this, because this is, I mean, I'm not sure if the user is familiar with Bayesian analysis, but this is an assumption in the Bayesian analysis model for network meta regression, because that's what we refer to as treatment-specific interaction, is the coefficient of the interaction of the effect and the covariate, so the drug and the covariate. And unrelated, so I'll repeat what I said in the app. Unfortunately, I cannot go too much into detail, but unrelated means that you are assuming, so you have as many coefficients, as many basic parameters. So if you have 7 basic parameters for the effects, you will also have 7 coefficients. Then the unrelated assumption, it means that your coefficients, so the treatment-specific interactions, are unrelated. I think they're also called differently sometimes. There isn't really a, in the literature, so like, I think they're called with different names. This is the strictest and also more computationally heavy assumption, because it assigns it basically assumes that you need to assign a prior for each beta, so as a different prior, independent prior, while the exchangeable option, also called common, sometimes, as I said, like there is no unified definition for it. It's when these basic the coefficients are actually drawn from the same prior, which is normally a normal distribution with a mean and variance. And when I said earlier that the value of the coefficient shown in the case of exchangeable, it will actually show you just one value, is the value of the mean of the normal distribution from which these coefficients are drawn upon. I hope I didn't confuse the user more. It's also like I don't consider myself an expert in Bayesian and in this explaining these things, but I tried to do my best explaining it.
No, it was great, Virginia, don't worry. Just quick question: does the user have access to the model in case he wants to, let's say, change heterogeneity priors or make any changes in the model, or that's not something?
You mean actually from changing the model itself, then to put it in the app?
Yeah, if someone wants to change, let's say, heterogeneity priors.
Unfortunately not. Yeah, it's also, I mean, the same way we give the assumption for like the option to change the interaction. I mean, technically it would also give the option to change the heterogeneity or other parameters. Unfortunately, I think that's it's possible, but I think at some point it just becomes too much for the app itself and also for the users. What I would say, and yeah, maybe it's also good in the future, like especially since we are planning to do this as a paper, this tutorial paper. I mean, the user can also do a network meta regression themselves. If they are the expert in the field, you know, they can run a network meta regression. They can do it themselves, and they can compare the the two estimates, you know, the unadjusted and adjusted estimates, and instead of looking at ours, because maybe our model is not the best or is not appropriate, then they can use their own. And that's also why we give the option of overrule the decision, because it doesn't have to be so strict.